Tape recorder's running, right? Tape recorder's running.
Hey, Steve.
Hello, Brett Starr.
How are you today, my friend?
I'm good. Spring is springing here in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah, same here. What about this time change thing? Like, that one caught me by surprise.
You know, I'm squarely in the faction of daylight savings time is bullshit.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm not a big fan of spring forward.
Yeah, its moment has passed. And I noticed that, like, every few years a politician will like shorten it by a little bit and a little bit more, and so it's definitely not what it used to be when you and I were growing up. Yeah. I don't know why they just don't ditch it altogether.
Well, if you live in like Arizona, they don't observe such quaint traditions as daylight savings time.
Yeah, we've got folks in Chile, and their time zone changes like 15 times a year or something. It's like sometimes it's a 4-hour time difference, sometimes it's 0, and everything in between. I don't really understand what's going on there. I need to dig down a little deeper. But yeah, time is a funny thing. And
a relative construct.
Yeah. Well, hey, I wanted to talk about the Employee Engagement Market Map 2022 today.
All right, let's do it.
And I wanted to talk about it on many levels because this report that you and a team put out marks a real shift in strategy for, what I think the rest of the world would probably call analyst reports, how our analyst reports are being delivered to market. Mm-hmm. And so before we talk specifically about the employee engagement market map, let's talk a little bit about the history, which started with Brandscapes. And so we used to release Brandscapes. Tell us a little bit about how Brandscapes work and what they were intended to do.
Yeah, the whole idea behind the Brandscape was to provide a mechanism for people in when we started them, the HR tech market, and now what we call the work tech market, give them a mechanism for understanding what is going on in the entire landscape of brands across categories. A lot of times, and you and I see this all the time in talking to founders and teams internally at companies, they have, of course, they're, very close up to what's going on in their own organization. They might have line of sight into, a field of companies that they're competitive with. But when it gets kind of like, broader than that, they don't really necessarily have a clear vision of where do I fit in, what is going on, and what is kind of the broad picture within the industry. And so the whole reason we came up with the Brandscapes were an attempt to provide that context and perspective that, as we go through our work and we're talking to, literally hundreds of brands every year, on a very personal one-to-one level. And we do a lot of reading and interacting with, the information that comes in over the door and the media we consume and those kind of things. We felt like we had a position to offer that perspective better than most other entities out there.
Yeah, and I want to drill down to that in a moment, just like how this stuff gets done and, our bottom-up approach to things and, why we're kind of uniquely positioned to do this. But when was the first Brandscape? What year was that you put it out?
Wow, it was 2014, I think.
2014.
Maybe 2013. Yeah, so we've been doing this for almost 10 years.
Wow. And at the time, these Brandscapes, which have now become market maps, and we'll talk about why, they were largely aimed at people in the work tech industry. So they weren't for HR people. They were actually for vendors and, consultants and analysts and stuff like that to try to, we wanted to help, kind of define the different, categories and shifts in categories and trends that were going on. And you had a really novel, kind of model at the time, which is that we've had this theory. It's not a theory. We've proven it over and over and over again, but it started as a theory, and then we did a lot of research to prove it, that brand performance actually has, a significant impact on market share and leadership and stuff like that. Usually within like 18 months to, a couple of years. If you measure brand recognition within a specific area of the market, that brand recognition becomes predictive of market share within a short period of time. And you were really looking at, if I remember correctly, power brands and velocity brands. And, describe a little bit about the, difference between those two and why it was important.
Yeah, what we wanted to do was we spent some time putting together an algorithm that gathered publicly available information combined with a lot of our social listening tools that we have on site to look at things like, what is sort of the online footprint of a brand? Everything from, how many social media followers do you have to, press releases to earned media coverage to what are your customers saying about you on review sites and things like this, and really try to put it into a force ranked number that allowed you to compare different brands. And one of the things we realized is that there are certain, what we call the power brands that are always going to be more or less the same, and you're not going to see a lot of movement. So it's just like, Oracle, SAP, Workday, they're always going to be right up there at the top. And so I don't think that, where we rapidly kind of ended up was not as insightful within a given snapshot of any moment in time. Although, as we saw changes throughout the years, we saw some very dramatic shifts from when we started kind of doing that in 2016, 2017 to the past few years as, really we saw the HR tech market evolve into the work tech market. But we also felt it would be helpful to highlight the velocity brands, these brands that come out of nowhere and suddenly everybody's talking about. And so we wanted a mechanism for kind of capturing both things within the scope of our brandscape. And a lot of times when you're looking at any, analyst group report, if you're looking at a Gartner MQ, it's just like at the end of the day, that's somebody's opinion. We wanted to turn this into something that's objective data that we could just say, the numbers are what the numbers are. We're, we feel like we have this calibrated right, and we're just gathering the data and there it is. Yeah.
Well, there's so many, kind of important things to point out here. You've got a great statement in the market map, which we're going to get to in a moment, but it's like, basically when you go out and the team goes out and they look at like how vendors are grouped together on like G2 and stuff like that, it just doesn't make any sense at all. Right. Yeah. But the model that you're describing around velocity brands and power brands, I think initially a lot of people thought that we were like trying to measure marketing performance for organizations. And this kind of goes back to product delusion. And some content that we, talked about over the last several weeks where, people often feel like, the best product wins. And we know for a fact it, it doesn't. It's, the company that's able to execute. And so we were looking at brand performance, not as a, kind of, marketing, grading marketing performance in a vacuum, but because it's the most predictive of, what companies end up becoming the leaders and kind of defining the path of innovation in the marketplace, if they're velocity brands or just, kind of what the mainstream looks like from a power brand perspective. And I remember we were at Achievers user conference. It was called ACE. I can't remember what ACE stands for. This was a long time ago. Do you remember what ACE stands for? Like Achievers
customer event.
Yeah, there you go. It was too obvious. And we were surprised because, you relayed the story to me. I can't remember if we were together or not, but you relayed the story to me because, we had initially intended those brandscapes to be for, insiders in work tech. And you were sitting at a table with a very large company who said, thank you for doing the brandscapes. We used it to create our RFP and to guide our evaluation of solutions. What was that company? It was a big one.
If we're going to name names, it was General Motors.
General Motors, that's right. And what we've realized over the years is that the brandscapes, the audience for those is, just as likely to be HR people leading product evaluations as it is, vendors who sell in the space or consultants or whatever. And the other thing that, I want to point out, there's a couple of things. I've always had a love-hate relationship with brandscapes. Mostly love, because I love them, and they're amazing, projects that take a lot of resources and a lot of time, but they're so good, they're so damn good that often people read them and mistake us for an analyst group. And while we are this weird, kind of mashup of analysts and consultants and marketing folks and, just a bunch of different people and what's, quickly approaching 100-person organization, is probably going to get larger than that pretty soon. We're really focused on, just kind of a wide range of customer experience, like brand experience and marketing experience and sales experience and product experience, and increasingly moving into other experience domains. And so these things were so good, and they were so widely read that we would, I remember, a couple of years after we'd just been, dutifully putting these things out, that we just started getting calls from people who wanted to brief us so that they could be included in, kind of the next, brandscape. And, while great, that was awesome. I was also like, well, yeah, we should also tell them that we, sell stuff, like marketing stuff. Yeah. But I say that tongue in cheek because they've been so successful that there's a big segment of the market out there that thinks that this is what we do for a living is, an analyst group. But, the follow-on to that is the quality of these reports and the way that we're put together, the way they're put together. These things would cost thousands and thousands of dollars if we sold them. And what do we sell them for, Steve? $0.
We give them away.
Give them away.
It's either a brilliant idea or an incredibly stupid idea.
Well, I think that we're learning it's a pretty brilliant idea. 10 years later, it's like suddenly and gradually, right?
Yeah, I've been in content for many decades now, longer than I care to admit. I'll just admit it. It's 30. And, we've seen a shift where it's just like content wants to be free. People do not want to pay for content. No. And I think that ultimately, in a market that is noisy with content coming in from all angles of varying degrees of quality, if you're saying something that's worth saying and you say it with a high degree of quality in the execution, that's the moment you're trying to achieve. And if we're doing our job right, it comes back to us in terms of work. And we've seen that proved out, many, many, many times there, where the brandscape is the entry point for a relationship that can go on to be a significant years-long relationship with a client.
Yeah. Well, I want to, point out a couple of things as we go along in the conversation, but we're not doing brandscapes anymore. You switch to market maps. And why? What was wrong with the brandscape? It looks like you had an epiphany. And so why are we doing market maps now?
Well, it's interesting because I also have a love-hate relationship with these brandscapes. We love doing them, and we love the kind of the impact that they have, the buzz factor, the brand benefit we get out of it. It's just they are incredibly time and labor intensive to produce. It's just like a lot of people think that this is something that I'm doing all on my own, and I don't. It's just like it takes an entire team of people to craft this. And you look at the end of any brandscape, we've got an extensive amount of credits. It goes, from, various iterations. We have inputs from all number of smart people in our agency. And then, we've got all of these brilliant designers and developers who have created our proprietary light paper product that we build it in. And so it really is a team effort, but it takes just hundreds and hundreds of hours to produce a brandscape.
Well, let me pause you there, because I want to drill into that a little bit. How big is the core team that puts this together? Because I don't think people, realize, like, a lot of analyst groups out there are 2 or 3 people, right? And
Right.
we're a pretty big organization that's growing, and we put a lot of folks on this. So how big is the core team that works on this, on these multiple market maps that are going to come out?
On an average, it's like 12 to 15. I'd have to go back and kind of look at the credits. We try to mention everybody in it, but it's just like, one of the things we do as part of our internal review process is we do a company-wide peer review. Yep. So literally everybody in the company gets to read it, poke
Yep.
holes in it, weigh in on it, and offer value. And what we find is that process of poking holes and challenging makes for a stronger end product. And it wouldn't be nearly a stronger product if it was one person's vision.
So 12 to 15 people making direct contributions, and then peer reviewed by, as many as like 80 people, right? So there's a lot of people contributing effort. And the second thing I wanted to point out is that this is an interactive market map. It's not a PDF, white paper situation. This is an interactive digital asset that is delivered on a patented technology product that we developed called the light paper with an L. And we did that, Mercer was on that, like years and years ago. And it's like one of those things I look at, I'm like, well, that was a product we could have spun out and become $100 million company.
Yeah, and that was homegrown innovation. We did. It's not like we sat there and told the team go build this. That was Michael Mercer, our director of technology, and a number of other people on the team identifying a problem, which was, PDFs suck, and specifically PDFs suck when you're trying to read them on a mobile device. Let's go fix that and make it responsive and interactive. And I think we're on generation 3 of that product. And it just keeps getting better and better and better. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize about this, because we also sell these to our customers, everything from developing the content, doing the creative and the interactive, to developing and field these things, is they have a really long tail as a lead gen and demand generation device. I mean, literally, we are closing deals off of light papers that are 6 or 7 years old, and that keep coming up in organic search and lead people to us. And they're like, hey, I need to do business with these guys.
Yeah. And clearly we're going to drop a link to this in the description so that people can check it out. But it's just more functional than a PDF in only like a million ways. So for instance, you can embed tweet outs. You can have people automatically, connect with their social media networks, and share content from the reports online. But it can also be plugged into your MarTech stack, and you can actually get analytics around, how people are engaging with it, how deep they go into it. You can put forms, in mid-flow so that maybe they read half the content and then have to sign up for the other half or whatever. And so it's just more useful. And it doesn't require, it's basically our own no-code, low-code product. And then we're also able to provide, all the content creative services to really make it sing. But enough about us, enough about how awesome the light paper is and how everyone should have one, and the fact that we deliver those, for clients. So we were talking about why you switched from the concept of Brandscape to Market Map.
Yeah. And I mean, it was sort of twofold. Number one is when you look at what's, the component parts of a Brandscape are, they were the data aggregation for the lists, a lengthy, trends report for what's going on in the industry, a trends report for what's going on within marketing in the industry, making very direct recommendations. And as such, it takes a long time to produce. Like the lead time and production time on a Brandscape is 6 months minimum. And I think that what we're all seeing in kind of the post-2020 world is this is a market that is evolving and changing very rapidly. And I think that just keeping up with the pace of change is something that we can't take that long to develop an asset. And so that was epiphany number one. We need to be faster. Number two, it was like, you know what, these brandscapes are overbuilt. And so one of the things that we were getting consistent feedback on, especially kind of going back to the well-being brandscape, we got so much feedback on that, people saying, you know what, the way that you drew the market map in that brandscape, for the first time, I finally understand how this entire category functions and how it's put together.
Yeah.
And so, when we were debriefing with the sales team and they were talking about the feedback that they were getting through the conversations they're having every day and the way that they're interacting on social media and phone calls and emails and things like that, that was really the number one takeaway. And so one of the things we decided is, let's focus more on getting a series of market maps out, just the market maps component, and we can break out the other parts, the marketing trends, the work tech trends, into separate reports. So that would allow us to move faster, but also provide more of that context that we knew that the market was hungry for, especially at a moment of rapid change.
Yeah. And, one of the carryovers from the brandscape that I think was really, sharpened in the market map was, everybody wants, especially analysts, to fit everything into little boxes on the hilltop. Little boxes made a ticky-tack. Is that how that song goes? Little boxes on the hillside.
That was Weeds,
anyway,
right?
Yeah. And prior to that, I think a folk song. But it's not that clean. And especially now where, category definition is in flux because we're in the middle of a new organizing principle that's, introducing new combinations of features and, functionality that doesn't neatly fit into the box that's next to the other box that's next to the other box and all that stuff. And one of the things that I really appreciated about the brandscape, and I think has been sharpened a lot in the market map, is like, look, it's a messy market. And things fit together in messy ways. Maybe let's focus on, that messiness instead of trying to tame it. And I think it gives a much more accurate view of how all this stuff works together and causes people to understand how, certain solutions are the confluence of multiple, categories. And I was talking to somebody who was, working with Gartner recently. And they said even Gartner is like changing the way they do everything because they see that, this typical, taxonomy of market categories, as if it's like the animal kingdom, just doesn't really work to accurately capture, where companies fit. And then I think to one of the points that you made in this market map and team makes is that this is why G2 and, sites like that suck, is because they're, just trying to push a square peg into a round hole over and over and over again. I know vendors are frustrated as well because those review sites are very important, especially in the mid-market, and they have to go in and pick the little box that they go into, and they're always disappointed that little box doesn't accurately capture, who they are and what they do. Really, just a view of how, markets are organized that is, in my opinion, a much better match to the true chaos that exists in the market, while still offering people that sense of psychological comfort that, things, can be located on a map. It's just the map, kind of has some overlapping territories and, stuff like that.
Well, and within different kind of like contexts, a product provides a different level of value. And I think we're trying to embrace that complexity while still trying to make everything digestible and easy enough to understand, like in the engagement brandscape, where we're talking about what's going on with employee communications and what's going on with well-being vis-a-vis employee engagement, knowing that there's going to be a separate employee communication brandscape. There's going to be a separate well-being brandscape that is more about kind of the core use cases around that. But these solutions still are contextually relevant against the employee engagement use case or user benefit. And so let's address that, knowing that you're going to have different categories appear as, bigger or smaller circles within different market maps.
Yeah. So I'm looking over here on this other monitor because I'm actually reading through the market map as we're having this conversation. This one is all about employee engagement. People probably haven't, necessarily used that label in a long time. Y'all make this point in the market map. What's the relationship? Let's get into some of the content. What's the relationship between employee engagement and employee experience? And what insights are you bringing to the table here?
Well, I think that, this is, I think, the third employee experience or employee engagement focused report that we've done. We've done a couple of other employee experience focused reports. And I think that when you kind of rewind to sort of the genesis of, the employee engagement category, which, as we point out in this report, doesn't really exist and never really existed. It was really more of a use case than a category. There was, I think, you go back to the 2015, 2016 timeframe where we kind of defined, what are the component parts of employee engagement. We focused on recognition and reward solutions, workplace well-being solutions, and then engagement measurement solutions. And, really that whole idea was, how do we, engage employees, tap into that discretionary effort so they are, A, productive and innovative, but B, less likely to self-select out and find another position because they're not engaged in what they're doing here. And so for a lot of the kind of the 2010 to 2020 timeframe, that was really kind of the context of we need to find ways as employers to engage our employees. But I think that, very much in this 2016, 2017 timeframe, there's sort of an artificial dichotomy constructed of, it's not really employee engagement, it's employee experience. And so those were sort of artificially set up as mutually exclusive and opposing terms, which, as we know, is not true, not correct. And then I think that when you got into 2018, 2019, it became very clear that employee experience was something that employers everywhere were looking at as they were trying to find better digital solutions that they could create a better experience for employees so that they could be more productive, that they could be more engaged in their work. Really looking at completely turning over what was going on within sort of the people tech stack. Then, of course, COVID hit, and we saw the entire market kind of tumble over itself to overcorrect toward employee experience. And at the same time, we saw employee engagement hit kind of record levels. Then over the past, say, 6 months, we're seeing employee engagement then dip again. And so it seemed like employee engagement was not as relevant. And then, of late, there's sort of a newfound belief that, no, we really do need to pay as much attention to the engagement component as we do the experience component.
Yeah, great insight. And everybody wants to tie it to the Great Resignation now, right? And so that's another big, kind of theme out there. But I want to go on a rant for just a moment, if you can allow me to. We're kind of like the band's band or the comedian's comedian, when it comes to content like this.
Yeah, we're the Velvet Underground.
That's right. So we've been putting this stuff out for years. We've been predicting trends, years before anyone else, and have a long history of those trends playing out in very similar ways to, the way we predict them. And it's not rocket science. I mean, we've got a market development model. We know how this stuff, kind of has worked from, market segment to market segment over the last 30 years. And it's just it's a pattern that always repeats itself. So if you have that pattern and you're looking at, you've got this bottom up resource that we have where we have nearly 100 people who are talking to work tech vendors every day, either because they're working with them directly in a client relationship, or they're having sales calls with them, or we're taking briefings, or we're doing bottom-up research of, just wanting to know everyone that's in a category so that we can get a good read of what the expectations for that category are. We've got a lot of resources applied to gaining information and applying that to models that we know that work. And so it bugs the hell out of me that people then take our stuff and go out and, basically like reproduce the same diagrams, use the same models. And look, as the Velvet Underground, we get it. Okay. Do it. Take our stuff, because we're trying to move the industry forward and we want to help as much as possible. Just cite us. It's like journalism 101. If you're going to steal our shit, just cite us, and then it's not stealing anymore. It's like academic at that point. It's like, right. we would love to be a footnote in your report if you're going to rip off our entire fucking model, which is, I'm not directing this at any single person. There's like 10 groups and people out there who, devour our stuff. And within weeks, I guarantee you, go out and read this market map. And then about 10 to 12 weeks from now, you'll see a lot of people, with very similar diagrams, saying very similar things and having very similar quotes and press releases, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. Just cite us. That's all. Is that fair, Steve? You've been a journalist for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And I think that, when you look at, what's going on and what has been going on in this market over the past decade, it's just like, we're all learning from each other. And it's just like, one of the things that we have tried to do is give credit where credit is due. There are a number of super smart people that we learn from all the time. And we really try to go out of our way to link to them. So it's just like, if we're reading something in a Josh Burson report, we're learning from that. And, hey, we'll send a link to that. Or if we read something in a Brandon Hall report or something talking to like a Mike Rochelle or a David Wentworth over there. Yeah, it's just like, we're going to give credit where credit's due. Or Red Thread Research with Danny and Stacia, or, what have you, Sarah White over at Aspect 43. It's just like, we want to give credit where credit's due, because it's just like, we're all learning from each other. It's like, to draw another rock and roll analogy, it was like, you know what? The Beatles and the Beach Boys were listening to each other's records and they were trying to outdo each other. And it's just like, that's just how we all get better, is we are constantly pushing and trying to drive innovation within sort of the perspective generating, sense making function of this thing that we do.
Yeah. And I just think I totally agree. There's just a right way to do it. And, what I would tell people is that if you are, and not just us, because, we usually know what the source is, the original source of a perspective or whatever, because we read everything and we're friends with all these folks. And so I see people copying, other people's stuff as well. Just know that that's undermining your business because, basically when we're talking with literally the hundreds of vendors that we're talking to on a weekly basis, and they point to some insight that you're claiming as your own, and we say, oh, yeah, well, here's the original source of that. It's Red Thread. Here's the original source of that. It's Josh Burson. Here's the original source for that 2 years earlier. It's a Brandscape from 2016 from the Starr Conspiracy. It just undermines your business. So just keep it above board. And if you are part of the discourse, as we used to say in academia many, many decades ago, if you're part of the discourse, acknowledge the other people in the discourse instead of trying to position yourself as the, like sole think tank for, all of these sources that you're pulling information from, that you're adding to, I'm sure. But you're not doing yourself, any favors, and you're not doing the market any favors by not opening up the entire, kind of bibliography of sources that you may have consumed in order to derive your unique insights. Because people, have the right and responsibility to draw from multiple sources when they're making an important decision. So anyway, rant over, but it's just, I didn't mention any names. I bet you're surprised. I didn't mention any names, but, I felt the need, as another, market map is going out, to just bitch a little bit about how often we get ripped off.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I think that it's, I'm definitely a believer in the rising tide lifts all boats. And I think that when this is something that our esteemed colleague, Tony Spangler, with our public relations and analyst relations practice, talks about. The reason that you as a vendor need to give a briefing to an analyst is they can be evangelizing your concepts or they can be evangelizing someone else's concepts.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, one of the things that, I'm not really wrapped up about, who gets credit, who doesn't, or whatever. I think that at the end of the day, a lot of the ideas that we have been putting out in the market for the better part of a decade now, we see being ahead of the curve. We see being adopted in terms of the nomenclature and the lexicon of how the market talks about itself. And so we've been validated. We know that the content that we're putting out there for the express purpose of just being educational is having an impact. And so at the end of the day, I mean, we're achieving what we're trying to achieve, and we're helping be part of that rising tide lifting the boats. And so
you're absolutely right.
We're good.
I try to walk through life with an abundance mindset, but on this point, I am much more petty than you are. I'm just, I'm tired of walking into like board meetings and having, someone's opinion presented to me that is clearly taken from work that we've done, like word for word, like just pure plagiarism. But whatever, I'm over it. Moving on. Let's just, close with, my just appreciation. I hope everyone who listens to this and follows us on social media and our newsletters and everything, this is just as applicable to HR people as it is to, vendors and consultants and all that stuff. A lot of work went into it. A lot of people worked on it. Great job, Steve. Great job, team. And I'm always flattered when someone says, wow, you did a great job on that new, report that came out, or I love your newsletter. I'm like, yeah, I just read it too. It's fantastic, because I had nothing to do with it, because I would mess everything up and slow everything down. But it's just such a great feeling to know that so many people value the content that comes out of the Starr Conspiracy so much. And you're part of a big team of people who are doing it, but you've been doing it. Back when, before we got religion around, one team and, few departments and lots of flow and, all that stuff, you actually ran a division in the Starr Conspiracy called the Intelligence Unit. And the Intelligence Unit was set up to create content like this. And this is the living legacy of what the Intelligence Unit was. And I know in my heart that we would not be nearly as successful or nearly as broadly known around the world for our impact on work tech, were it not for the attention and drive and passion that you brought for content to the Starr Conspiracy. And we've only been working together for how long now?
13 years?
13 years.
No, 14 years in April.
14 years.
Almost 14 years. Here in 2 weeks, it'll be 14 years.
Well,
and we've been drinking together even longer.
Yeah, that's true. Funny story about Steve and I. We met running a political campaign, or at least contributing heavily to it. I think at some point we became the de facto campaign managers.
Yeah.
But our candidate got 3% of the vote. So I always say, if you want 3% of the vote, be sure to hire me and Steve, and we'll help you.
Yeah.
But that's how
political consultancy, not in the cards for us.
No. Truth doesn't matter as much there as it does in work tech, ironically. But let's not get political.
Yeah,
anyway,
let's not go there.
Yeah, I am so deeply appreciative. I think this is excellent work. I hope everyone takes the time to read it. I was going to say download it, but we haven't been getting people to download shit for, like years since we invented this light paper thing. So just go check out this amazing, immersive digital experience around employee engagement and the market map for 2022. And a shout out to the probably 100, work tech vendors who are listed in that report. And a big shout out to all of the, people from copy to research to creative to, marketing and everyone in between who put this together. It's a huge project. A lot of work goes into it, and it's really meaningful. And we wouldn't send it out there unless, we believed in it, because we feel like we have a responsibility to get things right. And so we hope you give it a shot. Check it out.
Absolutely. I want to give a special shout out to one member of our Brandscape team our Market Map team, really our entire marketing team, who is instrumental and toils relentlessly behind the scenes for very little recognition, but is really a force to be reckoned with, and that is Ray Liberio. He is the imagination behind a lot of the eccentric graphic design that we have.
Yeah.
And he really leaves it all on the field when it comes to coming up with a lot of these visual articulations in the market maps and other marketing materials. And not only is he a very talented designer, he is also an honest-to-God Texas punk rock legend. He is
rock
been
star.
in a number of very he is literally a rock star. And he is an amazing human being on top of that. So Ray, I salute you, sir.
Same here. Ray also does our Employee of the Month, posters, which have, they're the stuff of lore and legend over the years because they're so hilarious. He's also the person who designed a lot of the graphics that we use for the Hey Bret Starr podcast. So when you want, he's part of a big creative team and they're all amazing. Ray does the really weird shit that is just,
that's
really,
the greatest
really
compliment
Ray.
you could give to Ray.
Yeah. Thank you, Ray. And thank you everyone who worked on this, and hope you enjoy reading it. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Bret.
Catch you next time on The Price is Right.
Hey, Bret Starr. Hey, Bret Starr.